Hey everyone, welcome back to Inside Gaming. Today we're reviewing Borderlands 3, the Borderlands we had to wait a long time for. We are very obviously huge fans here, but there's some good and some bad about it. We'll get right into it though, and when you're really swinging for it, huh?
I'm watching my figure.
Yeah.
I'm getting a little boxy.
Oh, Jesus Christ. So yeah, I guess we'll start with what I would consider to be one of the weaker aspects of the game. Probably the weakest aspect of the game, which is the story and the writing, you know, the lore, which, I would consider starting with this because I would argue that there are some Super Borderlands fans out there. God bless you. No slights intended, but I would say most people are coming to this game to shoot things in the face, get a lot of guns, and play with their friends. The good news is that part is still great, and there's a lot to do there. We'll get there in a minute, but first I just got to get this off my chest because god damn, this game has some garbage writing. Just some bad stuff. So it starts off pretty familiar. You start on Pandora, you get off a bus, you're a vault hunter with no real backstory or motivation, ended up saving the galaxy or whatever due to some lore stuff that by the end of the game it's just an NPC just dropping lines on you to try to get you to care about a story that only suddenly just got introduced. The writing is just not good. It's a nonstop parade of fan service characters that kind of pop up and it's like, remember them? And you're like, yeah, I do, but that's not enough. So there are some successes in the story, but there are sadly a lot more critical failures. The chief one of mine that really rubbed me the wrong way is Ava. So this is like a preteen character that's just, from the ground up, seems like manufactured to appeal to preteens. Sort of like the self-insertion character. It reminds me a lot of Ahsoka from the Star Wars Clone Wars series. So she's got blue hair and a nose piercing, and she grew up on the rough streets because she's an orphan, but then she gets taken in by a siren, and she's gonna be a vault hunter someday, and how dare you tell her to stay on the ship because she's gonna go out there and do what she wants to do because she's just so precocious. And it's just like the most mind-numbing setup. And why is there this character in an M-rated game? And furthermore, it's like, it reminds me a lot of like the Poochie phenomenon. For some reason, this dumb little girl suddenly becomes the center of the entire universe for no reason, and all the characters that should have much more to worry about are like, where's Ava? Oh gosh, Ava, isn't she just a lot to handle? And I'm just like, I don't get it. And I guess another kind of middling failure, I think, are the villains of this game. They're pretty weak. Troy and Tyrene Calypso. It's a neat concept, I'll say that. They're murder streamers. So they rose to prominence on Pandora by streaming murders to the entertainment of all the psycho bandits that were there. And then because of that groundswell, now they can reach out and start striking deals with the other corporations in the Borderlands universe, which leads them to like events of world importance and stuff like that. The problem is, it never goes beyond that. So there are some cool angles they could have worked.
Yeah, you're right. Like the when it comes to the main antagonists of the game, they are an inch deep and mile wide as far as where there's a lot left on the table where this commentary could have been a really genuine way to have an interesting villain, and instead it's kind of never gets deeper than that joke that they say a billion times. They're like, make sure to like, subscribe, and obey. And it's like the commentary is that if you watch their content, then now you are one of their disciples, and that all it takes for you to continue being their disciple is to keep being intravenously fed this kind of like bullshit content where there's like a few times over the game where some other antagonist is like, hey, your people aren't doing what we need them to do, and then one of the Calypso twins will come on and be like, oh, well, you're not giving them the content they want. All they want's violence. You need to make it really simple for them. So make sure to kill some stuff on camera, and then they'll be fine. And I was like,
that would be cool commentary. That would give you something to think about, some angle. I agree. And it's just not there. Instead, it dove more into Borderlands lore, which the game presumes you care about by the end of it. And I don't know about you, but I totally did not.
I don't care about the Borderlands at all. It's more of a Chorderlands.
Oh god, it doesn't. Oh, that's. So like, actually, if the game said that, I would have laughed. To put it in another meme parlance, though, to me, I had a total like Lost.jpg feeling by the end of the game, where it's so dumb and one-dimensional, and all of a sudden it tries to flip and make you care. That you're just so uninvested, and the whiplash of the tone, it makes it even worse. That's the worst part of the game, and it's not that bad. You can just ignore it, except the cutscenes, which are unskippable. That sucks. Now let's get on to actually playing the game, which is where all the good news is. Going on a higher level than that, just talking about the volume of content in the game, the campaign is very long.
Ooh. Yeah.
And that's a good thing. Don't get me wrong. Like, I enjoyed playing the game. Some of the story beats along the way kind of let the air out of my balloon a little bit, but there's a lot of content there. So I only did the story missions, and my playtime was about 25 hours, and that's largely, I want to say, just beelining through, critical pathing it. I sidestepped a little bit when I saw like a claptrap part or a log that was easy to get to. I did a couple of side quests just to get the flavor. But yeah, there are tons of side quests too. So there's plenty to grind through, especially if you're a 100% kind of person.
Yeah, which is nice that they added in this game a quick mission tracking swap option so that you can just tap the D-pad on the controller and it'll swap through your active targets. Which is nice to not have to jump back into a menu and a quest log and activate one thing or the other. So it lets you kind of have that ADD and make that decision on the fly of what kind of thing you want to chase.
It doesn't really do the MMO or the Ubisoft thing of showing you all of your quest objectives for everything all the time. I actually kind of like that because I'm getting kind of tired of seeing a mini map just filled with diamonds.
That being said, the way that you kind of pitched the campaign being very long, I do think it's telegraphed pretty early on through the first section of the game where you're on Pandora. My God, Pandora. This game is so slow to start, and I found that some of the mechanics that introduces you to in the early game don't help that in any way. So that initial early grind I don't think is reflective of the rest of the campaign.
Yeah, I think that's 100% fair. There's a big thing after you leave Pandora to basically broaden the world, which I think is very successful. You go to other planets, they all have unique visual design, and I think more importantly, like the world design of those levels is distinct too. So Promethea is this big cyberpunk city. The music reflects that, the visuals reflect that, but the levels are also laid out like city grid. So it's a lot of like straight streets and right angles, whereas other like more swampy or like more mountainous planets have level designs to match. So there are big wide open Pandora style zones and maybe more linear sort of kind of Destiny Strike level kind of zones. So I appreciated the variety of levels and the variety of visuals. That helps a lot of not just being in the desert all the damn time. The one thing that I'm not super fond of is that the game is still very flat. Like most of the combat just takes place in a wide arena. Maybe there's 2 levels with ramps in between, but I guess I was hoping for a lot more just geometry variety. And just speaking of the general length of the campaign too, there's stuff to do after it's over, and I don't even think I understand the full depth of that. So it has modifiers you can turn on to make the enemies tougher, and they drop better loot, more experience, like torment levels in Diablo 3. There's also zones where you can unlock just wave-based attacks that you can play through with co-op buddies to keep leveling and getting gear and stuff like that. And I have to assume that the intention, since everything is games of service these days, is that they'll keep bolting on content, more raid bosses and stuff like that. So I finished the game and I still wanted to play more, which to me is a great sign for the volume of content and the health of the game. Like, there's a lot of side quests I kind of want to go see, mostly because I want to prove to myself that there is well-written, funny stuff tucked in the game somewhere. Yeah. But so I mean, the game is not so poorly written that I can't stand it. I want to make that clear too, and I just really like playing it. So I really want to like join up with my friends and play whatever class I want, because in co-op too, everything scales relative, which is really nice. So the gameplay is great. I had my doubts that like the looter shooter aspect of Borderlands 3 would still be fun, especially now that we have things like Destiny that are ostensibly filling that gap. But I think Borderlands 3 still has its own charm and personality in terms of its gameplay. The loops are still enjoyable. Combat mechanics allow for you to really find a combination of like upgrades and skills that kind of push you ahead of the leveling curve, because that's kind of what the whole game is about. It all scales to your level. So difficulty is kind of an illusion. It's just a bunch of knobs that are getting twisted in the background. What you can do as a player and express yourself is by customizing your build around the guns that you have and the abilities that you pick. And to that degree, there is a lot of freedom, I think.
The gun variety is really fun. You can tell it's a ton of kind of random wheels that's spinning in the background, but it still keeps it fresh. And like the big one that I picked up on in this game that's new to this, specifically Borderlands 3, is the whole idea of the alt-fire mechanic on guns and the way that can kind of let you have... So I think they do forced like ammo scarcity so that you scroll through your inventory a lot, and so making sure that you use different weapons. But then like beyond that, each specific gun, you can kind of cater it to the specific situation and use it as almost like a combo. So for instance, there'll be guns that have different ammo types depending on the alt fire that you use. So you could have like an electric shot that takes down an enemy shield, but then switch over to like a radiation shot that then is really good against flesh. So you don't have to switch guns to have that different variety of weapons necessarily. And then there's really cool novel mechanics that they introduced that make each gun feel diverse, because the whole shtick is like, there's over 1 billion guns, and that can kind of get lost sometimes. But like, you having those really meaningful differences, like there's one gun that there's actually a few guns that their whole shtick is that you fire tracking darts, and then you can fire whatever projectile off to the side, and it'll still find its way like a homing missile.
Yeah, all the Atlas weapons.
And it seems very like, oh, it's such a gimmick at first, but then I got into a situation in a boss fight where I basically couldn't emerge from this pillar. I was like crouched behind this pillar because I was just getting blasted. And I was like, oh wait, I can just like pop up and throw a tracking dart and then sit here and face the sky and just keep shooting upwards. And that was how I beat that fight. And there's some really novel pickups, like there's a shield I picked up that negates you having a shield. So it takes your shield down to 0%, but then it lessens the damage that you take. So you take like 23% less damage from anything, period. So it's this cool kind of like roguelike structure where certain pickups will give you both positive and negative attributes that you kind of have to weigh against each other. And it's like adds a lot of character to the actual weapons themselves, which is kind of the whole initial sell of Borderlands in the first place.
But kind of along the same track of how guns can sort of think outside of a lot of conventions, I did appreciate that there were enemy mechanics that did as well. Destiny, man, it just click the heads, and sometimes just click the tummies because that's what's glowing instead. And it's fun enough, don't get me wrong, but Borderlands 3 actually kind of really adds some cool crowd mechanics to the enemies. So it's a lot of click the heads. Don't get me wrong, but there are some enemies that play around with that mechanic. So one, if you shoot his head off, he freaks out, grows a tinier head, and then rages out, like gets all of his health back. So it's like, don't shoot him in the head. I know, it's shocking, right? There are other ones that like, there are enemies that will put out like shield drones for other people, kind of a minor thing. There were healing characters. One that I liked was the Guardians. Like some of them, when you kill them, their spirit flies out and then starts wisping around the battlefield. And then if it goes into another enemy, that enemy will get another life bar and like power up. So you have to shoot the spirit after you kill the dude to just manage the crowd. Pretty cool. And then there are other Guardian enemies that'll come up and like slam the ground with a staff and release a lot of them all at once. So I appreciated that. Something that requires a little bit more thought than just throw all grenades, shoot everything, and then you'll just win eventually. One other thing that I think bears touching on, specifically talking about the gameplay, is the character classes. I spent most of my time with Zane, the operative. Spent a decent amount of time with Flack and a decent amount of time with Mose, but you were doing Amara, so I'll let you handle that. But one thing that is kind of clear to me after dumping some hours into each character is that they all play and feel pretty differently. It's all based around action skills because otherwise you just have the guns. But the action skills all kind of pop at a different rhythm and all have a different mechanic that really changes kind of how you think about what you do on the battlefield. So Zane, he's more about aggro management. He can summon a shield that can protect everybody, that boosts people's damage when they shoot through it. He can summon a clone, like a digi-clone that distracts enemies. And then he gets buffs where like if you shoot an enemy that's not shooting you do bonus damage and things like that. He's got a little drone that can run around and fly things. So he's more about like managing aggro and bosses and being like sneaky in that regard. Mose is just about explosions. She has a mech that can call in at certain times on a cooldown. You get skills that will reduce that cooldown or change how often you can do it or how long the mech stays out when you call it in. And then like all of these abilities that will like cause additional explosions or return grenades to you. So yeah, it's interesting how like different characters have different buffs that encourage you to play in a specific kind of way, and those ways are distinct. Each character feels different when you play it, and you kind of have to get into a different mindset to play it well.
Yeah, and as far as Amara goes, it's the one that I just stuck to primarily the entire game. She's the Siren class, which is kind of the more like traditional magician paladin type, the warlock, if you will. And that's usually the type that I go for in these types of shooters, but I found they did some really novel things to switch up that type of normal trope as far as the character class. So like one thing that they really pushed in her skill tree that I found really novel was there was a lot of perks that would encourage you to play way more aggressively than you think that a typical like magician type would be. Whereas usually you're encouraged to stay back and send energy balls and whatever from the heavens. There was a perk that I found that I instantly invested a lot into, that the closer in proximity you were to an enemy, the more damage you would do, and it stacked up to like 3 or 4 times. And so I found myself having this really interesting rhythm where I would get in really, really, really close and just do as much damage as I could, and then pull back. And as I was kind of letting myself heal up a little bit, then I'd start shooting my magic. Then I'd start kind of like relying on the more traditional paladin type tropes. And it made for a really satisfying kind of rhythm going in and out. And I really appreciated having that difference, because it's like you said, it all comes down to those action skills and the ways that they're reflected in each of the characters' trees that you start to see the really actual differences. Because other than that, it's shooting the gun.
Yeah, it's shoot gun.
You shoot a gun. Yeah, click it.
So yeah, that doesn't happen by accident.
No.
And after I want to say 10 hours with a given character, I started to really feel the sort of heartbeat of how that character worked, and that's cool. I think that's a testament to the game's actual design. And speaking of that, the sound and the music are also really, really good. I have my druthers about the way that the game is balanced naturally. When all the volume sliders are at 100, the music is way too low, and some of the sound effects are way too high. But I got in there and dragged some stuff around. The only and most annoying thing that I'll call out is whenever there's a dot or damage over time on your character, like they're on fire or corrosive or whatever, they screech like an asshole, and it gets so annoying.
Yeah, they all do that.
Yeah, so I played a lot of Zane, and if he got a toe in fire, he'd be like, blah, 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 blah.
It's super
Stop
distracting.
it! And those effects can last like 20 seconds, and you're just dealing with your character shrieking like a madman woman person. It got really annoying. Aside from that, I think the breadth and the quality of the audio in this game is super impressive. So in both regards. So you spend a lot of time with the guns, right? The gunshots all sound really good and distinct. So like each different kind of gun has a different sort of gunfire sound, and they're all good. And like by manufacturer, those sound effects can be distinct. So teddy bear guns, the cheap ones that don't reload, you just throw them. When they get low in a clip, the sound gets like higher and pinched. So it sounds like it's compressing as though it's like a shitty MP3. And you throw it and then the bass comes back with the next gun. Jacobs are all like bolt action, bang, clack, clack rifles and stuff. And all of those sound effects are super great and really add to the character of each gun that you have, which is great because that's kind of the whole point of the game. The guns end up being a lot more likable than the characters in that regard. The music I was equally impressed with, mostly because each planet has its own sort of musical theme, and they're pretty straightforward. Pandora, it's all like rickety guitars and humdingy, like really high energy folk
Ain't no
rock.
rest for the wicked.
Yes, exactly. But you go to Promethea, and suddenly it's all synthy, cyberpunky music again, but really good and fun music. The boss fight tracks are some club bangers, man. I really hope they put the soundtrack out because I want to keep listening to it. It's good workout music. It's pretty good driving jams. I listened to the Borderlands 2 soundtrack quite a bit. Jesper Kidd was on that. He's on this too. I'm not sure if he wrote the whole thing. I saw Mick Gordon's name in the credits too. So these are some of my favorite game composers working right now, and their talents are on display in a great way in this game. Voice acting is tough. It's tough because I feel like the performances are good, but the delivery vehicle of like an NPC just rattling off lines as you're chasing them to the next objective, or the writing that they're delivering to you, that's where the problem is. Not so much the actual abilities of the people performing the lines. The quality of the people making those things, their work shines through, even if there is a bottleneck somewhere else in the process that kind of puts a damper on the ultimate enjoyment of it. But speaking of bottlenecks, let's get into the classic bottleneck for Borderlands: co-op, multiplayer. Having to roll a new character for the 8th time and playing through the first part again just to get your shield and your goddamn grenade, just so you can meet up with that one dude and play for 1 hour before he has to leave and never come back. Thank God there were so many quality of life improvements here that I can't count them all. There are also some other weird bugs, but the fact that you can just roll a character level 1 in the menus in a co-op and just join somebody right away is a godsend. Oh my God. So I joined Zach last night actually, and I was like, let's see if this works. I rolled a level 1 Moze, dropped right in and started playing and didn't miss a beat. It was great. And all the levels scale appropriately to me. I get level appropriate gear. I'd even finished the game, so I was getting Vault Hunter rank on my level 1 character that then crosses to all my other characters. So that's cool.
Yeah, they also added a pinging system to this game, which I found incredibly useful when it was working correctly.
It's like, hey, there's a gun, or there's ammo over here if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Shoot this guy. Yeah.
Yeah. It's Borderlands it's the last Borderlands game. Actual 2 was quite a few years ago, and so it's good that they're kind of like being abreast of the landscape of current multiplayer shooters and incorporating some of those things like a ping system, which is great because Borderlands is a quintessential game where I used to just scream at friends, over there, he's over there. You don't see him over there?
To the left. That can mean anything.
It's like my left is totally relative to where I am versus you. So my left is your right. So yeah, the ping system has definitely helped us out a lot. One tiny gripe about the ping system is that depending on how close you are to the thing you're pinging, the ping reticule is either astronomically large to the point where you can't see the thing you're pinging, or it is just a tiny little dot, and you're like, yeah, I don't see the ping. So
yeah,
it's fine though. It's such a nitpicky thing to say about it.
It is and isn't. I mean, we were fighting a boss who's a man-sized, and I would ping him, and then the big red circle would cover 2/3 of his body, so you couldn't see his head. So you didn't know how to shoot critically. If you were using a sniper rifle, you're just seeing this giant red circle and just firing blankly into it, hoping that you hit him. So, we didn't die because of it. It was kind of funny, if I'm not lying. It's if Borderlands knew that's what they're doing, they make a dumb joke about how pinging covers up enemies or something. I don't know. On that note, there is some trolling potential, and I know that some of you internet comedians are gonna love this. So you can, if you signal a map transition or you want to quick travel, it starts a countdown, and just like Halo, if you pull up a menu, it cancels it. So can't wait for someone on Discord to lose their shit and just laugh and laugh and laugh every time we try to go to another area and they just keep opening that inventory. Minor things, but these are just something to note, I think. So yeah, but still, I consider that far and away a better trade to be able to just like drop in with a level 1 character and still play and progress and have fun. To have the level scaling to each individual player so everyone can contribute. All these things are great, and it's what Borderlands has desperately needed because it's the one thing that really prevented me from playing a lot of Borderlands 1 or 2. That said, we did have some technical issues when it comes to just the gameplay. Yeah, for me, the game would crash on exit sometimes, which would leave it running in the system tray. I was playing on PC, by the way.
Same.
So I'd have to manually kill it before the Epic Games Launcher would let me run it again. Some other things were like, if you're playing on a controller on PC, the menus would keep snapping to a random thing because it thought the mouse was active when it's not. So I'd have to like slap the mouse out of the way to make the controller work properly. You had the most aggravating one of all, though, it sounds like.
Yeah, so to be clear, the way that this game was given to us as reviewers was not in the traditional way of here's a review code, go put it in, and you basically get the finished game. We had specific logins to the Epic Games Store that were for review accounts that we are still not 100% clear if those saves are going to transfer over. So we might lose all the progress that we've made, but who knows? But yeah, it's a less conventional way of being given a copy of a game to review, and it definitely was not without its issues. And that may not have any effect on the final consumer playing it, but if you are playing it through the Epic Games Store, like we were, that actually might be something that impacts you. So I had save data issues like crazy, to the point where I had an error message that popped up constantly throughout all of my entire time playing this game. It was almost unplayable. And you made a funny comment about how the things we're willing to put up with when reviewing a game, and it's like no, like it was so bad that it would be every 30 seconds, and then there would be a batch of like 6 error messages where I got used to it being. It was like this weird QuickTime button game, like in the middle of my thing, where it was just like it was like I'm sitting there shooting a boss, and then it was like hit no 4 times in a row, and then I'd be fine for another 30 seconds, and then like another batch of like 5 or 6 error messages would pop up, and there was no way to resolve it. You and I had a lot of correspondence back and forth with 2K trying to figure out if there was something with like cloud saves or if it was like local save data issues. We couldn't come to any sort of fix, so
yeah.
To this day, I'm still struggling with that.
So it's a pre-release game, and I think the intention is for it to be cross-save.
Right.
So yeah, there's a lot of hitches that need to be shook out. It's really hard to say day one patches and all what your experience might be. All we can speak of to is the experience that we had, and it was pretty rocky.
One of the reasons I wanted to jump on this review specifically was that I got a chance to play it at E3, and when I was there, I had a very positive experience with it, but I came away feeling like it was very much more of the same. A friend of mine, his entire review of it was Borderlands, and I was like, that's really accurate, because it felt good. It felt like bringing Borderlands into the modern era, but it was nothing I hadn't experienced before, so it was a very pleasant surprise. I will say, actually getting time with it intimately myself, seeing that this is very much like that vertical slice we got at E3 was very intentional, and it was trying to keep us away from this whole idea that Borderlands as a series, however slowly it's being dragged that way, is evolving.
Yeah.
And this does, I think, for my kind of closing thought of the whole game, the whole experience, that even just trying to install this game is that this is a step in the correct direction. It may not be a very graceful step sometimes, but I do think that this is leaps and bounds in the right direction.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you liked Borderlands 1 or 2, you're going to love 3 because it improves on all the things that made those games great, and just the sheer volume of content, I think, easily justifies its asking price. If you're hesitant about some of the schmaltzier aspect of Borderlands, then it may be so in that regard. Like, everything's been amplified, for better or worse. So it's more Borderlands-y humor and everything that means, and sometimes it's a little too much. But I think it succeeds where it needs to the most, you know? It's super fun to play, the combat mechanics are enjoyable and actually really well thought out, all 4 characters are distinct and fun themselves. And my God, I am just super impressed with the amount of content they've crammed in this game. So I think it's a great place to start for people who love action RPGs, and specifically people that like Borderlands. Well, I think that'll wrap it up for our Borderlands 3 review. Thank you for sitting through that. We had an awful lot to say. Didn't want to leave anything out, I guess. So Thank you for watching. Thank you, Zach, for playing.
Of course.
Thank you, 2K, for the access to the game. And thank you, audience, for watching this. If you have any questions, I'll be trawling the comments like I always am, so leave them there. And I'll see you in Pandora. Bye, everybody. Borderlands 3 released on Friday, and it's been having some issues.
Did it leave a USB stick with porn on at a nightclub? Is it getting into amateur magic?
Boy, those are deep Randy cuts. Pedophilia. But no, I actually do think that there is a shield in the game that references the Lady Ejaculate. We'll just put it there. Let's hit with the good news first, because there is actually some good news. Early reports that the game